PsiOp-Radio.
Decoding the psychological warfare machinations within paranormal and parapolitical landscape. PsiOp-Radio.
Welcome aboard, everybody. This is PsiOp-Radio number 217 for April 25th, 2018. I'm Smiles Lewis.
And I'm Mac White.
And thank you for all for joining us. It's another live edition, streaming via the American Freedom Radio Network, the Anomaly Radio Network, and PsiOp-Radio.com for all the news links that we'll cover and more. So, how are you feeling, my friend? I know you.
I'm doing better. I'm recovering from the flu. I became very sick the day after we did last week's show, and now Diane's got it.
Oh, no.
But I'm over the very worst part. It's just back now to what it was before the flu itself hit in all its fury. Just a mild cough. So. How are you doing? I mean, the last time we did the show, you were preparing to go on a trip to New Orleans for the Paramania conference. And, what was that like?
Well, 2018 Paramania number 3 in NOLA, New Orleans, Louisiana. My first time there, my wife's not first time there, first time in decades, though. And we met up with a dozen or so friends and fans from around the country. It is an unconference. It's a uncoordinated, unscheduled, unconventional unconvention. It's an excuse for a wide array of radio show hosts, podcast hosts, and some of their fans and some of their past guests and authors of books and on paranormal UFO related subjects to come together. It's a very low key kind of a thing. Like I say, it's not a huge crowd, dozen and a half friends getting together. A lot of newbies here this year, I believe, and I missed last year's. It was out in Los Angeles, hosted by our friend Greg Bishop, who is one of the founders of it, along with Tim Banal of Banal of America, the podcast interviewer host who's been podcasting like me since before the phrase podcasts even existed. Started for him in like 2005, and I started carrying him on Anomaly Radio in 2006 and have carried him ever since. The events typically involve getting together and just and sometimes usually having like a list of probable things that people might want to do, but nobody being bound to that, and you get a few little clicks here and there, people who know each other or just obviously have an affinity and start hanging out and doing stuff, and so you get little splinter groups doing stuff. And with New Orleans, there's obviously a lot to do, some of it paranormal oriented, a lot of it just cool culture, cuisine, and of course the music. And we had a pretty amazing time. We went to one of the city's famous above-ground cemeteries, this one being the resting place of Voodoo Queen Marie Laveau, and went to Lafitte's bar down in the Bourbon Street French Quarter district, and then eventually that same day had a really great evening cruise starting before sunset on the steamboat Natchez, a big paddle boat that took us up and down the river to see the sights. But also for some, there's a dining a dining floor, and we were out on deck most of the time, drinking very heavily, and doing some live streaming. Tim Banal did a brief live stream from the table just as the thing was about to get underway, and on the back side of the boat was a stage where the Dukes of Dixieland were playing, and one of our attendees, past guest Joshua Cutchin, author of 2 and soon to be 3 books on the paranormal and UFOs and strange encounters, was doing his other big gig. He was sitting in with the Dukes on sousaphone, tuba. tuba solo coming up here in just a second. Check this out. So, and the audience goes crazy. And this was just the first of 3 gigs Josh did that crazy debauched night.
Wow.
After the paddle boat, where people were already pretty inebriated, they got off and went to these other gigs. Now, Joshua, being the professional, did not get as debauched as the rest of our crew. But some legendary stuff went down that night. And there's lots of videos out there that you can see Josh playing in these other gigs all around the French Quarter. And his parents were there, and it was just really cool. That's just that one night. And, of course, I went home after the steamboat. Went back to our really cool Airbnb pad over in the Garden District, which was a lot less rowdy, thank goodness, but still at one point had a late-night marriage parade go by, and I was literally in bed, and I'm like, what the? Really? Cool. Get out there and start videotaping it with my phone. We were staying in a place just under, like an actual residence, really cool, high ceilings, old school, but modern style in some ways, just underneath the Hotel Pontchartrain big neon sign, which some of you may have seen on my Facebook. I posted pictures of it. And then the next day I find out about the crazy debauchery that went on and how 2 of our friends didn't get up till way late the next day because some of the people that were taking darn good care of our host, Tim Banal of Banal of America, who is kind of the linchpin behind this, him and Greg and Steve Ray being a fan and researcher of some note in Dallas, who was the instigator of the whole dang thing back in 2016. Steve Ray and others were so worn out and beat from literally, doing the Jesus pose with Tim. Sorry, I don't want to give too much away, but they helped him get through safely to home and not in jail and with little or no injury. But he and several of the guys were totally out for most of the next day, whereas Tim was 2 or 3 hours later, the next morning, ready to go for the next day's event. And this kind of thing just went on and on. We went to a number of different really cool venues and restaurants and musical venues and bars. And, some people went off on ghost tours. Some people went off, for the just more traditional tourism. And then, unfortunately, I wasn't there for the final night. Well, before I get to the final night, the other thing is, on that paddle boat, besides having such a great time with all the different friends and fans, I got to meet Ken Thomas, parapolitical deep state researcher Ken Thomas.
Great.
He had actually originally intended to arrive with Skylar Alphagren, but unfortunately she had to cancel at the last minute. But and he was about to get on the boat and was trying to contact us, and his phone died, and so there was a brief period of time where I was looking all over the ship for facilities, and at some point I was walking by this guy and I was like, is that Ken Thomas? Oh my God. And then a few minutes later I'm like, that was him, I gotta go back. And so I reunited him with the group or united him with the group, and like I say, I'd never met him before in all these years. He was supposed to be a speaker at the 2001 National UFO Conference, and so one of the days, and we went to another cemetery and we were treated to an impromptu off-the-cuff lecture from Mr. Thomas.
Original events, all of his investigations, after 1960.
At the grave of Jim Garrison.
Researcher. He probably got it right. He didn't get a conviction.
It's do not engage shirt. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Do not engage. I didn't get a conviction, but it was like...
Anyway, I haven't had the chance to massage this audio to get it more presentable, but I hope to be posting that. And I think actually Tim Banal got video of it, and so that may also be available on Facebook. And so Ken went on for about 25 minutes and talking about his research into the Kennedy assassination and Jim Garrison's research and the other interesting aspects of that and other related cases, and the connection to the birth of the modern flying saucer mythos. That's something that he was going to lecture on at that 2001 conference, and it was great spending time with him and Greg Bishop and Joshua Cutchin and Miguel Romero, aka RPG Red Pill Junkie, an online writer and also a great graphic designer who we still have to have on, who's another contributor to the Reframing the Debate anthology. But so the culmination of this was a pre-planned, but it wasn't planned enough in advance for me to participate. So I had to leave before. I didn't get to experience this, which was basically on the main last day. Tim Banal and Greg were going to broadcast live from this occult bookshop venue. They had agreed to let them use the facility inside and outside, a little nice courtyard, to both do the lecture portion of the unconference. At each of these, we've tried to have some space reserved for a small amount of time so that, a handful of people can just, on the fly or presumably a little bit of planning ahead of time, to give a lecture if they want to. And I had actually prepared one, but when I realized I wasn't going to be able to do it, I was actually going to try to do it remotely, like once I got back in Austin, but that didn't pan out either. But anyway, the lectures went off really well, I hear, and afterwards, Greg produced a final episode of Banal of America, his 10th season, a finale of that. He's retiring his old interview podcast format that he's been doing since 2005. And going to be doing some new projects that who knows, he's got lots of ideas. And it was very emotional, and he didn't make a lot of observations about how he feels that the paranormal scene, largely I think partly due to the explosion of podcasting and lots of people researching and publishing on these subjects, changing the field. And it was very emotional at times, but it was great hearing fans and friends and guests and whatnot, each chiming in and giving, some, not quite a eulogy, but, just, a really great send-off. And that should be posted by this weekend, Tim says. And anyway, just lots of getting together in groups and touring and tooling around town and talking and it's a lot of times about these subjects and a lot of times just about whatever the hell people talk about. So it's great.
It sounds like great fun. And, New Orleans is a good setting for a Paramania conference because it's a city that for many, many years is steeped in lore of the paranormal and the parapolitical. You mentioned visiting Jim Garrison's grave, and Oswald spent some significant time there before the Kennedy assassination that summer of '63.
We distributed Fair Play for Cuba pamphlets, by the way.
Oh, you did? Well, good.
Left them at Garrison's grave too.
Great. I'm sure applaud you.
Well, that was all Greg Bishop's doing.
Good.
Oh no, cat's out of the bag.
That's great. Yeah. Well, and speaking of JFK, I understand we're right on the verge of seeing another, and I think the final release of the JFK files that are in the clutches of the government all these years.
Yeehaw.
CIA, FBI have, sat on all this time. And, well, so there's speculation about what might be there, if anything. And you're seeing different stories put out there about what we've learned so far from the first release many months ago, which is a lot. There are some really interesting things that it shone a light on. Most of that has not been really fairly treated by the mainstream media, but I think just a couple of shows ago, there was an article that appeared in the Washington Post that took very seriously. I mean, it was amazing to see in a publication like that, anything that would discuss objectively the evidence for a conspiracy in the assassination of JFK. One thing that is anticipated about this next release is that the documents will include information regarding a U.S. civil servant by the name of Charles Thomas, who was a diplomat with the State Department. He served in embassies all over the world and supposedly died of a suicide in Washington, D.C., way back in 1971. And the story is that it just shocked everyone. And there was no reason to understand why. And, well, it turns out that they say that he received a memo that said he was going to be fired. And, well, but after he died, then the State Department said, well, we really weren't going to fire him. That was a clerical error. But the family feels like that this was a cover for what really was a situation in which Thomas was a fierce critic of the Warren Commission report, and he was a State Department employee. And the reason he was such a critic of the Warren Commission and was a reopening of the investigation, which did happen later in the 70s, but this is 71 when he died, is because he had served in Mexico, in the embassy there, and in the mid-60s, and he encountered evidence that Oswald had supposedly met with Cuban and Soviet officials and KGB spies and all the rest. A very murky chapter, but there was something that he knew about all that. And he had been pushing for a reopening of the investigation, and because he believed there was a wider plot. And so his family believes, I'm reading from this article here, it says the Thomas family suspects that the filing error, in quotes, that saw Charles fired might have been a deliberate bid to silence him. And quoting his youngest daughter, she says, Washington overpowered my father like a steam shovel, tossing him into a heap like discarded dirt. She wrote this in a letter to Donald Trump, appealing for the final release of all JFK-related files by the National Archives.
Wow, there's going to be stragglers at the very least, and one always has to suspect that we'll get, just against the sanitized version of, yes, maybe hopefully some stuff that we've never actually seen before that might actually shed some light, but got to keep an eye out for, hey, look over there, a squirrel, distractions.
Yes, that's right. And, we've reached the point 50 plus years later where the Washington Post can put a story like that out that treats so-called conspiracy theory as fact and treats, objectively, and nobody notices, and nobody really says anything about it. It just gets, thrown in there in the mix with everything else.
Drowned out with the noise of empire and police state.
Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of excitement over the past week. When is there not? Yeah. We've had more mass killings And we were talking about that before the show. The climate we're in right now is just, there's a lot of fear and a lot of crime and a lot of violence out there. And just leading up to the days, well, sometime over the past week, while we heard about these incidents that happened in Toronto, in Canada, and in Nashville, there were here locally in Dallas on 2 days in a row. They broke into live afternoon television, and what's going on? They've got a live shooter, and in both cases, it was at one of these big box stores. The first day it happened, it was at an IKEA in Grand Prairie, and that ended with the person who was seen with a gun being shot to death. The next day, it happened at a Home Depot in Dallas. And that ended with the suspect shooting 2 cops and 1 security officer employed by the store. One of the cops later died, and the suspect ran off. And it turns out that these were not necessarily, we don't have any reason to believe there's anything other than just criminal confrontations in parking lots in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. There's nothing political and so forth, but it shows the climate that we live in right now. And for not for no reason was there, did they break in with live coverage, helicopters circling these big stores and so forth? Because there is a climate of fear and division and hostility, mutual hostility in this country like I don't think I've ever seen. But now we've had these 2 terrible incidents in Toronto. It was done European style. They don't need guns. If you're going to commit a mass murder, you just rent a van and you just drive it onto the sidewalk. And 10 people were killed. And it appears that the driver was targeting women. And it turns out that that's not some that actually, means something, because he had posted some while back on Reddit that, there had been some killer who had gone out and had killed a bunch of women, and he was praising that. And it turns out there's this whole weird screwball scene of misogynist guys on Reddit that were banned from Reddit a year or so ago because of that they just, obsess over their hatred of women and the normies, as they call them. I mean, these guys sound like the Revenge of the Nerds, only it's not funny. And they, think these kinds of things are great, And so he praised that. And anyway, most of his victims were women. And the other incident occurred in a Waffle House in the Nashville area, just a couple of miles from where a friend of mine out there in Nashville lives. And this guy is a naked guy. Walked in there and apparently just targeted, the people of color that were in there in the restaurant. 4 people killed. So both, just attacks by apparent crazies, but with some kind of agenda against, some other group out there. And highly disturbing. And, of course, in one case here in the U.S., he used a gun. But you don't necessarily need a gun. These vans and trucks that you can rent in Canada and Europe work pretty good as far as a mass killing weapon.
Yeah, and people have speculated that there will come a day when humans driving automobiles will be outlawed, except under the most extreme of licensed circumstances, probably. Mm-hmm. But this case. Both these cases, the Toronto van attack is anything can be used as a weapon. You can't protect everybody by outlawing certain things, though guns may be easier than others. But the incel, involuntary celibate aspect of this The other shooter was that young male named, I think, Elliot Rogers out in California, who it was like a drive around shooting. I don't remember him getting too far out of a certain area, but there was lots of overtures and overtones of this, like you said, describe weird, twisted, I mean, any guy knows how twisted one can become when you're horny as hell and feel like the world, especially the gender you're attracted to, won't have anything to do with you.
Absolutely.
But it is not okay in any culture, and it never should be, to turn your own angst outward. I don't think people should commit suicide, but if it's between that and doing something as stupid as mass murder, don't do it.
Well, what's weird is you have all these guys who seem to have this problem of incel, involuntary celibacy, and they are able to, that they don't have to kill themselves, that they can find people on the internet to reinforce their bizarre attitudes.
Yeah.
And, we're getting into some tricky territory here, because once again, we're seeing how the internet is being used as a place for extremely borderline psychotic people to reinforce each other's craziness. And I don't know, again, you have to wonder, is this engineered? Is this happening spontaneously? I have no idea. You could speculate either way on it. I just know that this is what's happening. And it's extremely bizarre that you would have these guys that just sit around and they just, fantasize and then occasionally act out, apparently, these terrible, monstrous fantasies. And it not only, demonizes, it taints the internet, let's say, as a place where only bad things can come from. We're going to have to control it, folks. So, I don't know. I don't know if that's part of an agenda, or I don't know if somehow, really, when the internet as we know it was created, and it's, been growing and growing, and it's turned into a bit of a monster, to tell you the truth. And I don't know if we can put the demons back in Pandora's box.
Yeah. Well, one other thing I do want to point out about that case, the Toronto case, and I'm so glad that none of our friends up there were hurt, but this is I'm sure going to devastate that community. But the police response, that video of the arresting officer, this murderer was not just gunned down, which was obviously what he wanted. Mm-hmm. But he was clearly a cowardly killer, and did this horribly heinous act, and then was obviously trying to do suicide by cop with his jerky motions, trying to make it look like he was drawing another weapon, not firing the one that he had. And the officer, amazingly, and I think rightly, didn't just blow his ass away, as much as tempting as that would be after having probably witnessed what he just did. Though it's crazy also that there's people right nearby that are just standing there and not, they see the standoff and they just don't run, but maybe they were afraid that would cause the gunman's, the driver's attention to draw on them. So
yeah, you never know.
And there was at least one woman in that group.
The cop acted amazingly. I mean, he didn't take the bait.
Yeah. And for whatever it's worth, maybe the family and friends of the victims will get some kind of feeling of closure, because the person can be brought to justice without what Canada doesn't have a death penalty, I'm sure, but Anyway, that's noteworthy.
There's one other aspect of it here. When you put all of this aside about the guns and the vans and the internet and so forth, we do seem to have a situation here where there are people who are just, I have never seen people so divided, nor have I seen so much mutual hatred in society as I see now. I've never seen anything like it. And a lot of it is propagated, I believe, by social media and so forth. But these murders, targeted specific people. They're apparently really, these were, black people who are targeted. And I know that there are, black people who act out violently against whites simply because, they're angry. It works both ways. And then you got this crazy guy in Toronto, and he's, out killing women. And it turns out that there's a whole online community of people who, promote that kind of thing. And we are seeing divisions and among people and hatred, just absolutely implacable hatred. And people, naturally, someone once in a while is going to go off the wires and just act it out. And it seems to not be getting better.
Yeah, and the divides just serve to divide and conquer, amongst the citizenry when, we really should be uniting against so many of the 1% and the powers that be that are so clearly the enemy of the people.
Well, that's a very good point, because who benefits by all this division that we're seeing? So you got to wonder, is some of it to some degree being manipulated or encouraged? I don't know. But we're definitely seeing the results of it. And you don't know how much mind control or intentional might be actually at work here. Yeah. When you read an interesting story here that you posted that shows you this. Now, I'd never heard about this before, but this one, this has the headline, Washington State Fusion Center accidentally releases records on remote mind control.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. As part of a request for records on Antifa and white supremacist groups, WSFC, the Fusion Center, inadvertently bundles in a zip file entitled EM Effects on Human Body. And this is a short article that we have a link to. And the writer of the article really doesn't know what to make of this, but writes that as part of his ongoing project looking at fusion centers' investigations into Antifa and white supremacist groups, he filed a request with the WSFC, and he got back many standard documents, emails, intelligence briefings, bulletins, reposts from other fusion centers, and then there was a file titled EM Effects on Human Body. And when you look at this chart, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but they got this whole diagram of the human body and these, like different parts of the body that they can affect with these microwaves. There's a line pointing to this figure's head. It says, reading and broadcasting thoughts, controlling dreams, forced waking visions, some synced with body motion, microwave hearing, transparent eyelids. I have no idea what that is. I don't want to know. Forced movement of jaw and clacking of teeth, sudden violent itching. There's a lot of itching that goes on, and itching in the genital area, and forced orgasm, intense pain. Sounds terrible. And it goes on discussing how all of these are symptoms of what it's called down here, in the title of this diagram, psychoelectronic weapon effects. And so, where did this thing come from? And who knows? But it turns out that we've got a few other really psychotronic links, and you posted this one here. This is an article, Why I'm Concerned About Samsung Hypnotizing People and Erasing Their Memory. I couldn't believe this. I thought this had to be a parody. But apparently, reading this, it says Samsung. That's the TV manufacturer. Swedish site recently revealed a new program that offers hypnosis so that you can erase your memories and rewatch your favorite shows for the first time. The program is called Unspoil Me, and it's comprised of 23 minutes of swirling patterns, mesmerizing music, and a hypnotherapist directing your thoughts and attention in order to erase your memory. And
that's crazy, man.
And the article goes on here to lead to this. It says, this isn't something new, despite the fact that we don't hear much about it. The U.S. military was using hypnosis in the Vietnam War, erasing soldiers' memory and then sending them back out to battle. And a link is given to the abstract of a scientific study, and then you can buy the whole article, but I'll just make do with the abstract here. It's called Use of Hypnosis in the Military. This is dated 1992. The abstract says, it's very brief, this chapter will describe the use of clinical hypnosis in the military. As a result of the studies that were done during the Vietnam conflict, the relationship between post-traumatic stress disorder and hypnotizability was made. The author concludes that combat traumas enhance hypnotic potential in some veterans, and that veterans with excellent hypnotic potential begin to problem solve better, preparing for a healthier post-war transition. Okay, but this thing that the article mentioned, erasing memories, this is what my father described to me back in the 70s.
Oh, yeah.
Remember, we talked about that one time on the show.
Yeah.
That he, in the late 70s, was undergoing treatment for alcoholism at the Schick Center in Dallas. It doesn't exist anymore. And they had a special kind of aversive therapy that they used that was similar to Clockwork Orange. And they were using what's the name of it? The sodium pentothal, a truth serum. And that in the course of these sessions, some repressed memories came out that he told me were repressed by the U.S. Army because during the Korean War, he saw some things that the U.S. Army wanted him to forget. And this was in the early days of the Manchurian candidate type experimentation, being the Korean War. I've never really known what to make of this story that my father told me. He had no acquaintance whatsoever with conspiracy theory. That's just what he told me. And he described that what came out in this hypnotic, truth serum therapy was an incident that was extremely traumatic that occurred in Korea, in which he, killed 2 men. So here's, I don't know if it's totally, verifies that sort of thing goes on, but it's something to really think about. Yeah. And I'll never be able to totally forget that story that my father told me because, in the years that followed, I started to learn a few things about MK Ultra. And now, I tend to take it seriously, but I still don't know what to make of it.
Yeah, and I do believe that the military-industrial complex got a lot of scientific data and insight into the induction of altered states more easily facilitated by people who've undergone trauma. This is the basis of the most heinous and hard to verify claims of MK Ultra sub projects like allegedly Monarch.
Exactly.
It's absolutely a fact that they tried to create, just the basic Manchurian candidate, people that could be programmed as assassins and couriers and spies and not even know it. And, as soon as you start noticing, as old as humanity and conflict, that every time our guys go out to war, they come back changed. And, if you're a scientist and you're unscrupulous military type trying to come up with better ways to do horrible, horrible things to each other, you just naturally start doing these experiments and find all that stuff out. And I can't remember the first name of the scientist, but his last name was Sargent. And remember reading his book, and it was going back to his studies of like tribal dances and the induction of altered states through the various rituals that tribes and secret societies all do. But it also had whole sections on shell shock and what it was called before, PTSD, and these the when people are totally mind fucked. That document, just to go back to that we must really state, and the author does state over and over that they are not. There was no evidence that the EMF, mind control, body manipulation technology document originated from the office that was giving it to him, but it was just strange that it was attached with a bunch of other stuff that seemingly had no relation to it. But most of the data in there, I just want to say, I haven't had the chance to look through all the pages. I'd say 80+% of it is all the verified stuff of like known effects. Now there's still the stuff about implantation of imagery and retrieving of imagery remotely through electronic means that seem I'm still iffy on that, but it sounds like there was a lot of good data in that document, but there could also be a lot of disinformation, and it could have just been an accident, or it could have been like, this might be related to what this guy's wanting, or maybe they're really trying to mess with that FOIA researcher.
The provenance of that will always be a questionable thing. Maybe someone was trying to leak some information. Well, the science of controlling the brain through trauma is, if you really study it, you find out that it's not new. And it goes back many, many thousands of years. And back to the ancient mystery religions, where they would put these people through this long, arduous ritual that might go on for days. And of course, there's some mind control happening there. You're totally, controlling someone's sensory input and what have you. Let me give an example here. They did this in all the mystery religions, but with one, they would at the end of like a week of all these traumatic rituals and just wearing the personality down, the initiates into this cult would finally be taken into a pit, and they'd be lying there naked in this pit, and there would be a lattice work of boards put over them, and then a bull would be brought out, and it would be sacrificed right on top of them, and they would literally be bathed in the blood and gore of the bull. It was a type of communion. And in this ancient Roman religion. But what it had the effect of doing was creating a new personality inside the mind. That is, there was the old personality, which is still there, but then there's this personality which identifies with the God, because this individual has been taken through the whole spectrum, the whole chronology of the God's experience, his birth, his life, his death. Dionysus and later Jesus cult borrowed from this, and you experience the gods' life, death, and rebirth as a new person. And so these techniques were worked out in that religious cult ancient context years ago.
Thousands of years ago.
And yes, thousands. And have, as I understand it, been perfected over the centuries. And the Nazis were deep into this research, supposedly. That the story is that's where Operation Monarch existed, and then with Operation Paperclip, Operation Monarch was brought over and became MK Ultra. That's the story.
Yeah.
I think there's something to it, but, we're talking secret history here.
And then bring it up to a few years ago and the rise of a new pop singer.
I'm Poppy, I'm Poppy, I'm Poppy, I'm Poppy.
Before Poppy blew up on YouTube while making some of the strangest videos on the internet.
I believe that everything's okay.
So, this is probably old news to a lot of our friends and fans out there, but the very first dinner the night of the Paramania, one of our Paramaniacs started to tell me his obsession with Poppy. And later in the trip, he would wear a T-shirt that said what we've got on the website, "I am not in a cult led by Poppy." And Poppy is this blonde, Barbie-esque, really looks way too young pop star who's on Island Records and who seems to have emerged onto the world stage around 2013, 2014. And her producer is this guy going by the nom de plume of Titanic Sinclair. And he used to work with and produce very similar weird videos with another young-looking blonde pop star named Mars Argo, Marsargo, and they look really similar, and there's this whole crazy saga and story, and the storyline, starting from her, coming out with her pop songs and doing the tours and performing and doing interviews, always in character, and it is a character. They slowly introduce this idea of, anybody can be a pop star. You just have to sell your soul to the satanic corporate Illuminati machine. And there's all these, symbolisms. It's like, all the hip hop music and everything now. Everybody's got a, have Illuminati gang sign, somewhere in the video. And hers are no different, except that they're not like traditional videos. They are very strange, with her just acting very robotic. And the implication is that she's been replaced several times, maybe a clone, maybe an alien, maybe a robot, who knows. Anyway, it's a really weird story, and it got even weirder when this person bringing her to my attention. Like I say, this is like 3 to 5 years old now at this point, and it's still going. And right before this NOLA Paramania 2018 revelation to me, in the days before this story had broken into the mainstream, we've got links to several articles from April 18th when YouTuber Mars Argo, Titanic Sinclair's previous project, is suing Poppy's creator for severe abuse and ripping off her persona. And, I'm immediately wondering, so how many fake lawsuits are used for entertainment and marketing purposes? Is that a thing? Because I really am suspicious here, because on the other hand, I could totally believe it, but it feeds the storyline in all probability, and there's a lot of it. It also has kind of the feeling of an ARG or some kind of viral marketing campaign, and we've got links to about 4 different little mini documentaries about different podcasters' exploration of this weird case. And it's not a case. I don't think there's actually any abuse going on here, probably. But okay, so but about abuse. So the weirder angle here is this: the person telling me all this at the Paramania says, "Oh, do you remember the Hampstead pedophile satanic network mainstream news flap from several years ago?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it rings a vague bell." And so I went back and looked and was like, oh yeah, I totally remember this emerging onto the scene, I think sometime between 2013 and 2015. And this Paramaniac says, in one of the videos where the kids are like talking about the abuse that they experienced, and a lot of people wrote this off as like the parents got the kids to say this, and that in and of itself was their abuse, but they were trying to allege abuse to get from the other kids, the other parent, in a custody battle, and that it was all just a custody battle gone wacko, with conspiracy websites and YouTube channels promoting it, and accusations that the police are suppressing this stuff. But so allegedly in some of the video of the kids talking about their abuse, they talked about being abused in fast food chains and
what
and even a pizzeria. Mac, you there?
I'm still here. Yes.
Okay. Did somebody get you, Mac?
No, I just moved my microphone.
Okay, so there's pizzerias actually mentioned, and so it starts. This in a lot of ways may have. This was probably talked about amongst the Pizzagators, looking into all that stuff. But I didn't remember that aspect of it. I just remembered some of the other stuff. And anyway, this person is suggesting to me that this might have all been. It was the Ruskies. It was yet another, divide and conquer, get everybody afraid of them, each other's, and their police and blah blah blah. And I'm like, well, that's to me, this person was not trying to convince me of their theory. It was more just like, hey, look at this weird information and tell me what you think. And anyway, I've just been looking into it, and I don't know that there actually is a connection. I have not found this alleged video where that description is said, but I've seen other people mention the pizzerias and the Pizzagate connection. And somebody who just one of the pop stars abusing these children or being present when the abuse was happening, looking remarkably like Poppy. Well, dang.
Poppy is supposedly also the nickname of George H.W. Bush, the former president.
The king is not dead yet.
He's not dead.
He's been in hospital ever since the Queen passed.
Yes, he's not doing well. So last I heard.
Yeah. Well, we got to go. Thank you all for listening. This is Miles Lewis.
And this is Mac White.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.